Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our Dovetails event called War Damage. We all know who the casualties of war are. We see them on the news every night. We see mothers cradling their starving children, whole families on the move, fleeing the bombings of their villages and towns. We see bodies lying mangled. But we never look at the damage that war causes to the soldiers. There are figures from the US which are really startling. 44 veterans a day die from suicide. Since 9/11, over 7,000 American soldiers have died in conflict. Over 30,000 of them have died at their own hand. And in Britain, we had 16,000 British soldiers sleeping rough at one point. That figure has come down a little lately, possibly because they died off. 4,000 of them are serving time in jail. Many of the rough sleepers have drug problems, and most of them are suffering from post-traumatic stress. We're all complicit in the continuation of war. We bring up our boys to think that being a man involves violence. We cheer the troops on when they inflict damage on other human beings, but we never think about what it costs those men to do it. And we have two special guests tonight who are going to tell us a little bit more about that. I'm going to introduce, first of all, Alistair Renwick. I should give him his full title. And Ali joined the British Army at 16 years of age and served for a number of years. Can you tell us a bit about your experiences of the army and why you joined?
Well, I was born in 1944, which was, so I was a war baby, the Second World War, and I came up through the 50s and 60s. Now, there wasn't much work around in Scotland at that time, and I was looking around and I sort of believed all the things about the establishment and that, I wasn't a dissident then, so. And I saw these ads about the army, you see, join the army, learn a trade and that. And there was lots of ads too about, do sport, join the army, do sport, go around the world, all this sort of stuff. So I inquired at the army recruitment office and they said, well, I was 15 then, you see, and I was just coming up to leave, school leaving age. So they said, well, why don't you go to one of our army apprentice schools, and learn a trade? So I said, oh yeah, fine, that's great, you see. So I actually took the oath of allegiance while I was still 15. But the week I went to the army apprentice school, I turned 16. So I was in the army apprentice school for 3 years, and I learned a trade, and I went through all of that. Now, I did try to buy myself out in the last year of the army apprentice school, because in the army apprentice school, I'd met some of the education corps were some of the old national service blokes. They were the ones that national service had more or less ended then. But some of the guys who had gone to university had the national service deferred for a couple of years. So they were teachers. They were acting as teachers in the army apprentice school. And some of them didn't want to be in the army. They didn't like the army. And they started talking, they would give you sergeant major jokes and stuff like that, and I'm going, no, you can't say that about sergeant major, And then I thought, perhaps they've got a point there. So it was them really that started me off sort of getting a bit disaffected from the army. And then at the end of it, I thought, no, I don't want to go in, into the full army. So I tried to buy myself out, but they said, no, you've been in an army apprentice school. You've got to stay here, you see. You've got to do 12 years before you get out, you see. So then I went into engineers. I went into the engineers. That was the regiment that, because I'd done a trade in that, you see. so Royal Engineers. So I wasn't actually involved in any conflicts, but I was there during the main part of what they called the Cold War, because one of Britain's allies in the Second World War had been Russia, you see. And after the war ended, gradually the West turned on Russia and said, and you know, the Russia became a main enemy, you see. And my first posting in the engineers was to West Germany. And at that time, we were doing these big NATO exercises. And all we were told was the commies are there in East Germany and you're here in West Germany, and they're going to come across the border at any time. They're really aggressive people. And they've got all these tank battalions, and you've got to stop them. So all the time as in West Germany, we were doing these great big NATO exercises designed to stop the commies coming. And after about a year of that, I remember I was lying in my barracks one day and I thought, you know what? I said, I think there's a Russian soldier in a barracks just over the border in East Germany. And he's been told the opposite of this. He's been told that the West's going to come and get him. And I said, I think his people are making a fool of him. And I think our people are making a fool of me, you know, because people were getting killed on these exercises and stuff like that, you see.
Really?
So yeah. These were serious exercises. They had a rule that they would stop the exercises after about 8 people were killed, and 2 of them that I was on, they stopped the exercises because that had happened. You know,
Oh my God.
there's a lot was in road accidents because they kept soldiers driving on roads for days and days and days and stuff like that. You know, but anyway. I was subjected to all this propaganda. Now, the one point I'd make about that is that at that time, the border between NATO and Russia was that border that ran through East Germany. Now, the border between NATO and Russia now is right on the border of Russia. So,
yes.
you know, I would ask people, well, who do you think's the aggressor then? You know,
Absolutely.
Because it's NATO that's pushed right across there, you know. Anyway, I then got a posting back to Blighty, and I was really happy. I came back to Tidworth, so I got away from West Germany because it was really an alienating place to be, I felt anyway. And
did you not find it quite exciting to be in a foreign country? Somebody that had come out of...
Yeah, but we were there as occupying troops to start with. By the time I got there, that was wearing off. And we were there mainly as this bulwark against the commies, right? You know, and all of this. And it was quite. There was a Scottish playwright, McGrath. I think his name was it?
McGrath?
Yeah. Well, he wrote this. He was in the National Service, and he wrote this book, guarding the Bofors guns, and they made it.
Guarding what?
Guarding the Bofors guns. Events while guarding the Bofors guns. And it was first of all a play, and then they made it into a film. And it shows the alienation that there was amongst the Scotties while you were serving in West Germany. It's a really good film actually to catch that alienation that went on. Anyway, when I got my posting out of there, I thought that's me finished with all of that. And then I was in Tidworth, and they said, well, this was 3-4 Field Squadron, and we've become air portable. And we're part of this air portable brigade that can go to any trouble spot in the world inside 24 hours and be up and operating inside that time, like you see. So I was there about a month or so, and they said, right, we've got to go, we're going out to the Far East, we've got to go to Brunei because there's a rebellion there and we have to put it down, you see. So I remember we had this officer gave us instructions and that, you tell. And they said, right, any questions at the end? Of course, they don't want him to ask any questions. So, I mean, I immediately stuck my hand up. And I said, isn't Brunei, isn't that a place where a sultan's running it? I said, is that a very democratic place when you got a situation like that? And the officer that was given the talk, he didn't like that. He didn't like that question at all. So they skipped over it, you see. And then afterwards, of course, he gave me pelters for having stuck my hand up and asked questions. Anyway, we went out to Singapore, and we had a week in Singapore to acclimatise for the heat and that. And halfway through it, they held another meeting, and they said, no, you're not going to Brunei. That's all finished now. And I think this whole thing was a lie anyway. And they said, you've got to go to northeast Thailand and build this airfield. Now, this was about 65, 66. And at that time, the Vietnam War was in full force. And the Americans were doing their Operation Rolling Thunder, where they were bombing the shit out in North Vietnam and the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And when they said we are going to Northeast Thailand, most of us just thought, oh, that's where all the tourists go. Lovely. It'll be a lovely place to go.
Yes.
And when we got there, you see, we were right in northeast area, which is not a tourist spot at all.
No.
And in that area, you've got the Gulf of Tonkin, and then you've got Vietnam, and where it was partitioned between north and south, there's a narrow strip of land which is Vietnam down, and it broadens out at the north and it broadens out at the south. So we were roughly equivalent to in Thailand to that area where Vietnam was partitioned, right? And so you got the Gulf of Tonkin, a narrow strip of land, Vietnam. Next, there's another narrow strip of land, which was Laos. And then there's Northeast Thailand, just at the other side of Laos. And the Vietnamese were bringing the North Vietnamese were sending lots of arms and men and volunteers, and women were involved too, down through the Ho Chi Minh Trail in Laos, because they couldn't get down Vietnam because it was a narrow strip of land and the Americans had it all blocked off. So they're coming down through Laos with arms and people to go to the south and fight. So we were where we were about 20 miles from the border with Laos. And it, and the Ho Chi Minh Trail was coming down through Laos, so we were very close to the Ho Chi Minh Trail, and we didn't know any of this when we got there. We just knew we were going there to build into Northeast Thailand, build this airfield, and we built this combat airfield. And some of us, because we started down the road from us, so there was an American air base at Yubon, and they were flying Phantom fighter jets out of there, and who were attacking the Ho Chi Minh Trail and attacking North Vietnam. Quite often they came over us, you see these flights go over us. They'd come back about an hour later and there'd be bits hanging off them, with the anti-aircraft fire in North Vietnam and that, you see. We started to say, well, what the bloody hell are we doing building this airfield here? I mean, it's crazy. And we were, it's nothing to do with this or that, or it's just it's a present for the Thai people from the British people, you see. And it was total bollocks. I mean, we were building it for the Thais, but they immediately handed it over to the Americans. You see,
the Americans, yeah.
And we said, is this part something to do with CETO? Because in West Germany, it had been NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. In Southeast Asia, it was CETO, the Southeast Asia Treaty Organization, which was it was their equivalent of NATO. You see. Oh no, it's nothing to do with CETO, nothing at all. Now, before we went, an officer had taken all our passports, because that's what happens when you go in an operation like that. And the officer goes and he gets them stamped up and all of that. So when we came back to Tidworth after we built this airfield and left it like an operational airfield and just left it just like that, we were given our passports back, and then my passport had a stamp in it saying that this chap will be operating in Thailand for the duration of his assignment, and he is operating for CETO. So it was saying that we were at this was a CETO operation. So the thing at the time, what was happening politically in Britain at that time was that Harold Wilson was the Prime Minister, and he refused to send British troops into Vietnam. And the Americans were pressing him very hard to do that. So Harold should be congratulated for not sending the troops in. But on the other hand, he couldn't afford, as a prime minister, from their point of view, right, to alienate the Americans. So he was doing he was letting other things happen. But he was trying to keep it secret because he knew there'd be people in the Labour Party who'd object to that, you see.
Yes. They wouldn't object now.
Our airfield was part of how the British helped the Americans in Vietnam, you see. And I object to that. I objected to that. So when I came back to Britain, I started to go up to London to go on the anti-Vietnam War demonstrations, which came to the attention of the Red Caps, the military police. I mean, to be honest, I was quite provocative because I used to get posters and that, leaflets for the next demonstration. I used to post them up in the barracks area. So that did cause a bit.
I liked what you said about they knew you weren't right because you were ordering the Morning Star or something from the.
Yeah. Well, I also put in an order for the Morning Star too, like, you know, and that didn't go down well at all. And anyway, I ended up with the SIB, who are the Special Investigations Branch of the military police, and they were making monthly reports about me, you see. So in the end, I with this unit, we used to have these flap outs. It usually ended up in Salisbury Plain, and they said, you know, and these were supposed to be like training for us having to go to an emergency somewhere. And after they started making reports about me, they used to have a flap out, and the OC would say, "Now there's a few people got to stay behind. There's you and you. That's admin and that." And you, and you'd point at me, you've got to stay behind too. So I had an OC's interview. I demanded an OC's interview, and I said, "Why am I staying behind?" So he said, "Well, you know, the SIB's making these reports about you." So I said, "Well, I'm going to apply to buy myself out again." And I'd done it about 5 times by that time, and they'd always refused me. And I said, "Well, wouldn't it be in your interest and my interest that this one goes through, sir?" And he didn't say anything, but he just looked at me, and then the Sergeant Major marched me out. And I put in my application to buy myself out, and he came through this time. So that was at the end of 78.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd also served for a short period in Kenya. That was after they got their independence, because we kept training areas there, and in Cyprus too. And I saw things there. And then I was in Northern Ireland for a short time, but this was at the start of 78. So it was, well, it wasn't, certainly it wasn't passive, but for the soldiers, it was passive at that time, you know. Mm-hmm. But I could see then that there was trouble coming, like, you know. So,
and Michael, can I turn to you? You actually did serve in Northern Ireland when that trouble started to.
Yeah, I was there in Belfast, 1981.
What tell us about how you joined the army? I mean, was it a case there weren't many jobs, or?
I think it was there from the off, from your very, very, very young age. I was born in 1960, so I think we were all brought up with a Hollywood version of what war is. You know, the Yanks are coming and all this nonsense, and if the British made a war film, it was all these dead SA chaps, yeah, okay, you know, and all that stuff. You know, they like to. It was only the upper classes that fought the war. You know, so from a very early age, we were brought up to think that to be a soldier was something. I had my Action Man doll. I had my Johnny 7 machine gun. I read all these stupid war books. So from the age of 5 onwards, we were programmed very much so to think that to be in the military was to be something. And that grew as I grew. And I was always threatening to join the army because I never had a good relationship with my father, and he said I wasn't tough enough to make it, which made me more determined to get into the military. I tried when I was 16, but my school record wasn't very good because I used to play a lot of truant, because I'd had enough of the bullshit at school. So they wouldn't allow me in. Then I tried again when I was 18, but by this time I had an assault charge against me. And God forbid they let people with violent tendencies into the military. It just wouldn't do, you know. So by this time I had moved to London to the bright lights, and I was 20 years old by this time. But I had at least the experience of looking after myself. You know, I wasn't completely green. Plus, as a youth, I was in the Army Cadets for a while, and. But the job I had in London, there was a security guard, and my boss at the time was a former member of the Scots Guards. And I had started to dabble in hard drugs at that time. So he kind of coerced and pushed me to join in the military. And because of him, I joined the Scots Guards in 1980. Mm-hmm. And I arrived at the Guards Depot, which is... well, the first thing you do when you get off at Brookwood Station is you remove your brain and replace it with a guard's manual. And so 22 weeks basic training in the Guards. And it was tough going, but there was no way I was not getting through it, because there's no way I was going back to Glasgow, cap in hand, and my father saying, "I told you so," you know.
Yeah.
So I got through with flying colours. And my first port of call was Belfast. So I remember getting my first ever flight from Heathrow to Belfast. And I remember going up the stairs of the British Airways plane and thinking, what are you doing? Are you mad? You know, hundreds and hundreds of soldiers had been wiped out, blown up, shot. And I thought, well, you're here now, you've got to go with it. And I ended up in Belfast, early 81. And there had been a hunger strike prior to me joining. I think I joined the battalion February, March time. There'd been a hunger strike over Christmas that hadn't worked, because they all went on hunger strike together. I learned all about this later on in life. They were all dying at the same time, and it was weakening the resolve. So it was Bobby Sands MP. He constructed a hunger strike where he would go on hunger strike first, and then 2 weeks later another one, then 2 weeks later another one, and that way they wouldn't witness each other deteriorating. I've read Bobby Sands' book, and it was quite horrific. Well, anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself here, but there was a lot of military activity. When Bobby Sands died, they just swamped the entire north of Ireland with troops, because we were expecting the shit to hit the fan, which it basically did. There was a lot of riots going on. There was a lot of shootings, petrol bombs, blast bombs. There was one occasion where a guy had been shot, probably for being a tout. I could see his body in the Armour Road, and our job was to hot pursuit, go to known players, people that were active in the INLA or the IRA, and we had to kick their doors down and arrest them, basically. And we went flying through this guy's door, feet first, and he was confronted with a man that was holding a blade, and he thrust it towards me. It nearly hit my throat, and I cocked my SLR. The guy next to me cocked his SLR, and he had two loaded SLRs pointing at his face and at his mouth. And I looked behind me, his brother was standing there, and I looked further into the living room, and his parents were sitting there. They'd been watching telly, you know. And somebody shouted from the back, "Shoot the bastard, shoot the bastard." That's no fucking way, man, you know. He dropped the knife, thankfully. If he dropped the knife, I'd blow your fucking head off. And he did. And I tell you, from that day to this, I breathed a huge sigh of relief that I don't think I'd be talking to you now if I had chosen to shoot that guy. I panicked and shot him. I think my life would have gone down a very different path, I think.
Have you seen that with other people that you knew?
Sorry?
You know, have you seen that in other soldiers that you knew, that, you know, that they did pull the trigger, they did?
Well, yeah, not just British soldiers, but since when I joined Veterans for Peace, with that's how I met Ali. I went back to Belfast. This is like 2014. I went back talking to former members of the IRA that were active the time I was there. They had killed people. I know soldiers that had killed people, and it doesn't sit well with them, because you grow up, and if you think that killing somebody is easy, then you're a psychopath, basically. But we're just human beings that had been trained to kill. Thankfully, I never killed anybody. But I know people that have done, and it's something that they struggle with.
Yes.
Whether they be ex-British soldier or former members of the IRA, it doesn't sit easy with you. As you grow and you get wiser and you realise that everything about the military was a lie. You know, I mean, would you like me to quote this?
Oh, yes, I had that.
Colonel Smedley Butler, a former US Marine. It's a very short quote. "I spent 33 years and 4 months in active military service as a member of the country's most agile military force, the Marine Corps. During that period, I spent most of my time being a high-class muscle man for big business, for Wall Street, and for the bankers. In short, I was a racketeer, a gangster for capitalism. During those years, I had, as the boys in the back room would say, a swell racket. Looking back at it, I feel I could have given Al Capone a few hints. The best he could do was operate his racket on 3 districts. I done it in 3 continents. And that's Colonel Smedley Butler from the US Marine Corps. Now, 33 years he spent, I spent 5 years, to come out, and then you realise that it was all a lie. It was all about plunder. Your soldier, your average soldier, is just an accessory to the rich man's plunder, or a defender of his already ill-gotten gains. You know, if you...
One of the things that I think Ali has written about brilliantly is that he said the British Army is a cult.
Oh, yeah.
And this training that it takes away, you know, your ability to make your own decisions and think for yourself. And
being called a cult is bang on. It is the ultimate cult. You've got your God, which is the regimental sergeant major. The officers are just the shiny bits, you know, but to brainwash somebody. Ali joined when he was 16. I was 20, so I had about 4 more years to develop my brain. The longer somebody's in the military and the younger they get them, the more brainwashed they become. They become absolute robots, you know, and I've met these people, they're frightening. They can't think beyond the military, and they think they're immune to any prosecution or anything because they are army. You know, and when I do talks at schools and stuff like that, I'm always very quick to point out to young, impressionable children, usually about 14, 15, 16-year-olds, that are keen to join the military. And I use the Falklands War, or Maggie Thatcher's 1982 election campaign. I use that as an example, that more men died during that bloody conflict. More men have died since than died during it. They've taken the suicide option because they couldn't. Thankfully, I was in Hong Kong when the Falklands was going on. I had done my tour of Ireland. I was in Hong Kong, so I was too far away to get involved, thank God. And the horror stories I've heard, guys were killing young Argentinian conscripts with shovels and spades and pickaxes. It was trench warfare. People getting obliterated with phosphorus, and Sir Galahad getting hit, and all those Welsh guards. But they used one Welsh guard as the cover, and Simon Weston, and how the British Army looked after him. But for every Simon Weston, how many other Welsh guards were ignored? You know? And I was talking to you on the phone the other day, and I said, it always amazes me. I've attended a few cenotaph meetings with the Veterans for Peace to lay a wreath of white poppies. We're always on last for some reason, you know. They don't want the public to see ex-soldiers going, so this is wrong, this is wrong. And people will walk past homeless people in shop doorways, possibly ex-service personnel, walk past them, look down their nose at them to go and pay homage to the cenotaph. You know, it's bizarre, it's madness. We really have to change the public's idea of what the military are. Because right now, the way that the media portray, I mean, look at bloody Remembrance Sunday. Every football game, the soldiers marching onto the park. What's the soldiers got to do with a game of football? To drum up this patriotism like they did in the First World War, the Second World War. They do it with every other war. But now they've got the media fully on board. And for a whole month, football commentators, newsreaders are all wearing poppies. They're all. It's become a national.
I'd like to see one of them wearing the white poppy just once. They all wear it. I'd like to see one of them wearing the white poppy.
Well, that's the ones I wear. Some of the looks I get when I'm shopping in Asda when I'm wearing the white poppy, but looking the way I do, people tend to stay away from me. You know, it's. Me and Donna went to one of the Remembrance Sunday parade. Donna was wearing her white poppy, and the look she was getting just walking next to me. the people glaring at her, they would look at me and I'd glare back at them, you know, you want a piece of me.
Well, we're all like the recruits, really.
Well, it's handy when you look like Shrek, you know, people tend to stay away from you.
Ali, perhaps you'd read us out the extract from last night, Another Soldier. And this is something, a very powerful book altogether. I mean, I found the whole book and Gangrene very powerful. But this is an extract which demonstrates exactly that kind of cult thing, and the breaking down and the forcing other people to think the way that you do. You read that for us, please, Ali?
Yeah. I mean, just to set it up, this is a young guy from in Scotland, in Glasgow, who's joined the army. And of course, the thing is, the intention is of the basic training is that they teach you coordination. So you're a group, you know. So you're becoming part of the tribe, and they cut your hair, and so you all, you know, and put you in the same uniforms. They all look like each other. And you do a lot of training like on the square, like drilling that, so you can be coordinated together. So you're there, you know, you're there as a unit, and it's to make you a cog in the army machine, and to get rid of your civvy misconceptions. And one of the interesting things I found in the army was that, you know, they teach you to hate, like you hate the next regiment because they're not as good as you. Like, and the hate goes out, and then they teach you that, see, they're trying to get rid of your civvy misconceptions, like you shouldn't kill people, you see, because if you're in the army, you have to kill people, you know, and that's what you're trained to do. So then there was two words that went together, like there was civvies and there was cunts, and everybody I knew in the regiment, we all used to talk about civvy cunts, you know. That was, we total disdain for them, because they're not these uniforms that guard them while they sleep, you see. They don't understand that this is what something that has to happen, and that, you know. Anyway, this guy, I was getting away from the point. This guy's joined the army, and it's they've been doing drill and stuff like that, and the recruiting, the training sergeants and corporals have been shouting at them, and this is where this comes in. Meanwhile, Corporal Rennie dealt with another misfit. And why did you leave your village, Sonny? Was there another idiot there already? Billy luckily mastered the drill techniques fairly quickly, and so escaped most of the invective dished out to the slower members of the squad. After a few weeks of basic training, some recruits indicated that they were considering packing up and going back to civilian life. The two corporals were the first to hear of this and immediately tore a strip off those concerned. What are you, fucking namby-pambies, wanting to run home to your mammies? They shouted, adding in a quieter voice that it would reflect badly on the training staff if recruits were lost. One of the new soldiers persisted in his efforts to get out. Called Willie Monroe, he came from a small village in the hills near the source of the Clyde. He was awkward at drill, coming in for much abuse, and found difficulty coming to terms with the rigid routine and the discipline. Sergeant Davidson's response when he heard of Monroe's intentions was to call a special parade inside one of the huts. Ordering the squad to stand to attention, the sergeant then told Monroe to join him at the front. We have a chap here who wants to leave this man's army, snarled the sergeant, pointing to Monroe while glaring at the rest of the recruits. Are there any more mummies boys who'd like to join him? No. Good. Sergeant Davidson turned from the squad to face Monroe. I've been watching you since you came here, and I've not been impressed. You're like a big girl. You even waggle your ass like one. I think we'll have to call you Marilyn. You're not a fucking queer, are you? The sergeant turned to grin at the squad, and most of the recruits giggled back. Turning back to Monroe, his voice softened. Look, son, I know it's hard, but keep at it. We can even make a man of you. You don't want to go home a failure, do you? They'll all say you couldn't take it. The sergeant turned back to the squad. I told you at the start that we are a team. You all know that next weekend is your first leave. Well, leaving the army is a privilege and has to be earned. Sergeant Davidson indicated Monroe. If Marilyn here fucks off, then that reflects badly on the staff, but especially me. The sergeant juts his thumb into his chest. I won't take that lying down, so I propose a deal. You persuade him to stay in and give this man's life a chance, and you'll get your leave as promised. Fail and it's cancelled, and I'll have you out Saturday and Sunday square bashing. The sergeant glowered at the assembled recruits and then at Monroe before shouting, dismiss. Now come here, Marilyn, dear. Monroe heard the voices and looked around scared. Don't run off, we just want a little chat. And afterwards, as a special treat, we'll let you give us a wank with your sexy little bum, you fucking Nancy boy. A group of recruits descended on Monroe and carried him off bodily. Later, the word went round that he'd retracted his application for discharge and the weekend leave was still on. Billy noticed that from then on, Monroe always appeared dispirited. Though he completed his training, he became the butt of abuse from the recruits as well as the training staff. And Monroe continued to be called Marilyn from that day of the parade in the hut.
Thank you very much.
I've witnessed similar, Jean.
Yeah, very powerful.
I've witnessed similar levels of bullying.
Yeah.
And it sounds as though that's what is supposed, that is what is supposed to make you all bond together. And
they create this gang mentality within you.
That's right.
And if somebody's, and it's group punishment, so if somebody's messing up all the time, they will punish you all. And of course, the individual that's messing up all the time is eventually going to get rounded on and picked on. And I witnessed this with a thing called a ceremonial bath, where this guy was a Coldstream guard, and he was always in dog order. He was always lagging behind in the runs. He was never. He was always a bit of a mess. He didn't know how to look after himself. I'm sure the guy had mental health issues. Anyway, the pack turned on him. And I didn't participate in this, but I watched it, but I didn't do anything to stop it either. And they filled a bath full of water. They peed in it. They emptied ashtrays in it, put Vim and all sorts of cleaning products, and threw his naked body in the bath and scrubbed him with bass brooms. That guy was gone within a week. He had just got now. What did that effect have on that guy? The rest of that man's life. That incident. I didn't do anything to stop it because all I was concerned about was getting through the training myself. So even though I didn't participate in it, I watched it. And sometimes I get a surge of guilt that I never actually done anything to stop it.
Yeah,
that's just where we were at the time. But yeah, I could give you loads of incidents, very much like what Ali was talking about, of the pack being not ordered. You know that film, A Few Good Men, Code Red?
Yes.
Yeah. That existed. If there was somebody messing up, then the pack would turn on that person and make his life hell.
Yeah. I'm going to ask the audience members for their questions now. Could I ask Anne Clark? Down there?
I can see her space, but there she is. Oh,
yeah, there we are. You can hear me.
There.
Yes, and it's a question for each of you, the same question, really. As Ali's just demonstrated, literature can be very powerful, but I wondered why, in each case, you have turned to that. I know that you're both active campaigners, political campaigners. What led you to try literary expression of the same views? And do you think, how does it compare in effectiveness, do you think, with political campaigning? So I don't know who wants to go first.
Craig, why did I start writing?
Yes, basically. And do you think...
Well, I remember writing poetry at school, but it was usually taking the mickey out of people, my classmates and that. But when I left the army, I was living in Surrey at the time, and very, very quickly, I was like a loose cannon. You know, if you looked at me the wrong way, I'd be in your face. So very, very quickly, I was in Woking magistrates many times, charged with various assaults, GBH, ABH, and they sent me to anger management, and they advised me to start writing my feelings down, as opposed to acting on my feelings, to write them down. And that, over the course of years, started to take a poetic form. I would quite happily say that writing and performing poetry over the years helped me a great deal. It was great therapy, and it allowed me to unload through a microphone or through the pen, and not using this. So yeah, that's how I get into the sort of writing thing, and yeah. So over to Ali.
Right. Well, I think, you know, that poetry, books, and that. I mean, if you see that around an issue, then you know there's something in the issue. So I think they're very important and everything like that. Now, I started writing that fiction because I was campaigning on Ireland for the withdrawal troops. And there was a lot of propaganda in Britain about the war. I mean, for instance, I don't know if anyone is old enough to remember the comedians on TV, and at this program, and the comedians come on one by one. People like Bernard Manning and people like that had been around the men's clubs up in the north and that. And a lot of them, they told sort of racist, homophobic, sexist jokes, you know, all the time, like, you know. But on Ireland, there was two forms of racism. One at that time that going on in Britain that were very strong. One was against the Pakistani community, and so the comedians would come on and they would tell these the P word for Pakistani, right, Paki, right, and they would tell and they would say and then there was this Paki in a corner shop. And the audience would fall about laughing. They hadn't even told a fucking joke, you know, but they just laughed about it. And then they would go, and then they would, you know, they would tell some joke then, and then they would go, and then there was this Paddy in his wellies, like, or Mick in his wellies. And the audience would fall about laughing again. So just the thought of an Irish person in wellies or a Pakistani in a corner shop, they just laughed. I mean, so that when I looked at that, I knew there must have been a level of stereotyping going on in Britain to create that atmosphere where people would just laugh at that notion. And for Ireland, you see, that created a sort of situation where it made it easier to say what was happening to British troops in the north, you see, because if you had to explain the political situation and the troops were acting as an occupying army, and they were being quite brutal against the people there, although obviously they were also getting quite a bit of brutality thrown back at them. That was a difficult thing to do. But if there was this view around, the Irish were, one, were stupid, and two, they were prone to violence, that meant that you didn't really have to, you know, you didn't have to explain it. Our boys are peacekeeping. They're there. They're just helping old ladies to cross the road, and then stupid and violent Irish are attacking them, you know. So now, as part of this, there was also a range of these thriller books that were appearing in the bookshops about Northern Ireland. And these were all basically the same. Our boys were, it was more or less the Nazi version, actually. They were all over 6 feet, blonde hair, blue eyes, incredibly handsome.
You both are.
And then the Irish that posed them had bad teeth. They looked funny, and they were small, and they were decrepit. And you thought, I wonder how they're managing to stand up to the British soldiers. But never mind that. There was this sort of portrayal, and it was a total stereotypical stuff. And I had a collection of them that went over 100, and I think there was about 300 or 400 written during the 30 years of the Troubles. So I decided to write a book myself that would be partially a thriller, but would tell the opposite side of the story.
Yeah.
So one would be, there would be about two people. One would be a young lad who would join the army in Scotland and go there as a soldier, and the other would be a young woman in Belfast who joined the IRA, the other side, and what motivated them and what they found out, you know. So that's why I started. That's why I started writing in that, you know, to put the alternative point of view.
Mm. It's a great
Yeah.
book.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, both of you. But I'd still be interested to know whether you think writing works differently or better, or just differently from political campaigning in affecting people, persuading people to change their mind.
Personally, I think it can start it off, you see, because I mean, I remember when I was in the army apprentice school, I came back to this area in Scotland where I lived, and I used to get a bus. It took about an hour to get a bus to Dumfries, and I used to go up to Dumfries when I was on leave, like, and because there's a couple of cinemas there, and I'd go around the town for a bit, and then I'd go and see what's on at the cinema. And so I went there this time, and All Quiet on the Western Front was on. You know that, and
Yeah.
they just made a new version of it actually in German, like, and it was from a German book. And I went and saw that, and I come out, and my head was shaking because I was thinking, that guy's talking about the propaganda war and the propaganda around the war, and I've never thought about that. And that started me thinking about all that sort of stuff and how they create this wall of propaganda to make you patriotic and you want to fight and all of this, you know, and the difference between what that propaganda is portraying and the actual real thing is just tremendous. You know, there's a huge gulf between it, which you try to keep secret. So that started me off. And then with songs, you see, songs is another thing. I remember when I was in West Germany, I went in this place, and I got this album by Buffy St. Maria. I don't know if you've heard of her. And
Yeah.
she was a Native American. And one of the tracks on it was Universal Soldier. And I used to play Universal Soldier at full volume in all the barracks I was in, because I thought it was fucking great, like, you know, because it was asking questions and it was saying this is going on and going on and going on, and it'll continue to go on while we let it, like, you know, this thing about soldiers going into wars and that, you know, and it's always the same thing, loads of propaganda, they go into wars, and then it's horror, you know, and all of that, you know.
Oh, thanks. Yes, that answers that. What about you, Mike?
Well, definitely people like Bob Dylan's songs that he sang, and various other ones, Pink Floyd, The Wall. So yeah, I've been influenced by these sort of it was when I joined Veterans for Peace and I started talking to other guys that had experienced what I had experienced. I began to think, God, that's what was wrong with me. So that being able to communicate with like-minded people, not just writing or reading books, but just to talk to people and say, I get it now. My head was messed up. And I was so violent because of my experiences, you know, I was reenacting them. As Ali said earlier, you're brought up, you're trained in the military to treat civilians as civvy cunts. You know, and if you've got that disregard for your own civilians, what kind of regard are you going to have for the Irish or the Afghans or the Iraqis, you know? So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry for using the C word.
Sorry. I don't think that's the worst thing that is going on in the world.
No.
Jim Aiken has a question.
Yeah, I have to say, guys, Alistair and Michael, it's a terrific. You've been there, you've done it, you've come through it. That's a great thing. You guys have come through it. But I was thinking when Michael was talking about the cenotaph, I don't know if it's just me, but have you all noticed in recent years that poppies have got bigger and bigger?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Fashion accessories.
Yes, they get bigger and bigger. And anyway, my question is to you both, and I think I know the answer I'm going to get, but never mind, I'll ask it. President Biden was recently in Ireland, and he spoke to an audience in Belfast. And very seriously, he said to the audience, only with peace comes economic opportunity. Now, the same man is responsible for selling the greatest number of arms throughout the world, and he's flooding Ukraine with arms at this moment. So I just ask you about the hypocrisy of that, or if you think it is hypocrisy.
It stinks to high heaven.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, but look, you got to get real about this. Biden and all the rest of them, they're just puppets. They're just mouthpieces. The same as our prime ministers. They're selected, they're put there by the powers that be, the 1%, if you want to call them that. So they're just script reading puppets. So, but yeah, the hypocrisy is beyond my comprehension. You know, the way they're talking about Russia being aggressive when America and the UK have been responsible, the Europeans, for the plunder of India, Africa, Australia, America, you know. Yeah. But it's the way that people fall for the bullshit all the time. Yeah. You know, and voices like mine and Ali's are very seldom heard on mainstream media because they just can't have dissenting voices. They need people nodding their heads and clapping their hands every Thursday night to keep the propaganda going, you know. So they're very good at silencing people like myself and Ali. And even Russell Brand, he's been banging on about it. You'll never see him on mainstream media again.
No.
He's getting pushed right to the background, same as George Galloway has. And anybody that has got something wise and sensible to say about the official narrative will get pushed out. Matt Letizia, a perfect example. He spoke up about I don't want to go into vaccines and all the rest of it, because that's not what this is about. But he spoke up against it, and he was sacked by Sky and BBC immediately. Yeah. You know, yeah. So yeah, they're very good at keeping the propaganda machine going.
What do you think, Ali?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned Ukraine, because when that started, there was a lot of articles in the British media and in the American media, and they were all attacking Russia and Putin and blah, 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 and all of this. And most people that I knew wouldn't read them, you see. And I thought, well, I'm going to read them. I just wanted to see what message, or is there any message in this, you see? And the message, one of the things that they were all saying about Russia was, big countries should not attack small countries. And I thought, you know what? I fucking agree with that. But if I was Irish, I would think, well, that's what England did to fucking Ireland, didn't it? They invaded Ireland, and then when they got pushed out in a war of independence, they grabbed hold of a little part of Ireland and said it was still part of England, like part of the United Kingdom. And they said, and we're doing that because that's our people there. Well, that's exactly what Putin was saying about the Donbass. So Putin was using exactly the same rhetoric. Now, I think that big nations should not invade small nations. But then there was three issues that I picked up from these articles. One, and the other one was, the second one was that they were talking about the dissidents in Russia who didn't want to fight in that, and how they're being persecuted. And of course, I think that's wrong. But they were saying that these people are heroes and they're actually really great people. And I'm thinking, well, Julian Assange, he's still in fucking Belmarsh prison. You know?
Snowden's still in the run, you know?
Yeah. And I knew a lot of dissident soldiers who opposed serving in the north of Ireland, who then left and they came around the Troops Out movement. In fact, I had a banner made saying ex-soldiers against the war in Ireland, and we marched behind it. All of them got a hard time from the state in Britain, you know. Because none of them were helped by the state. They weren't held up as heroes or anything like that. They got treated just like these dissidents in Russia are being treated. And then the third thing is that the article started saying that there should be this international tribunal, a world court, that will judge the Russians for what they're doing in Ukraine. I agree with that too, but I only agree with it if they do it for every country. I mean, what the Americans did in Vietnam was a lot fucking worse than anything that the Russians have done in Ukraine.
Yeah.
So the Americans should be in that court for war crimes, and Britain should be in the court for war crimes in Kenya.
The whole